Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's conversation. We were expecting a guest this evening, so welcome from myself, Sarah Jane, and from my co-host, Enolia. Enolia, hello.
Hello, hello, hello.
Now, we were expecting Mary Walken, and we actually don't have any idea why she's not with us. So she might jump on at any stage. So we are just going to carry on with the programme but it's actually her choice of topic. Not that we'll have any difficulty talking about this, because it's don't handle grief, let it heal. And I think, I'm sure you, like me, it isn't a matter of telling people to get over anything, is it? It really is just a matter of supporting people, because we all deal with things in our own way from our own experiences.
You're absolutely right. And, to step back and to look at how you process your grief, how you process when things that make you grieve happen in your life. Are you able to move through the story? Do you find yourself stuck in it, or do you find yourself avoiding it overall? And people have so many different reactions to trauma and traumatic events. And so it'll be interesting to really just unravel this a little bit and see it in a few different perspectives.
Yeah, and I think it really is a matter of none of us know how to deal with anything until it happens to us for the first time. That goes with absolutely everything in life that is something new. And if we are lucky enough not to have grief for many years of our life, then great. But grief comes in so many different forms, or should I say, for so many different reasons. It isn't just about death.
No.
It can be about the loss of a job, a pet going missing. It can be the bust up of a friendship. It can the loss of a house, a home, the breakup of a marriage. There are and I think grief for a child can be the hurt and the pain of a single word said.
Yeah.
It said out of anger or of malice or whatever. And even for an adult, something said very unkindly.
That's true.
Can be, and it is a form of grief. Anything that hurts can be a form of grief.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned a child, and I actually want to share this, is that children, let me position this statement properly. Children, if it's a direct impact to them, do experience grief, but a lot of times children will mimic what they see. And this is really important to understand, because if you have children all around you and you're not able to process grief well, they're going to pick up on all of the areas that are dysfunctional in that process that you're going through, because they have no idea. They look at what you're representing as how to process that, and then they go, that's what it should look like. And it's so important for us to understand that sometimes when these things happen, we're not the only ones grieving. Yeah. Or we're not the only ones that are impacted by this process. And that it's important to keep that communication open. It's important to just be able to articulate what you're feeling and how you're feeling it, and how you're processing it, so that a child can understand that it's not them.
I think a conversation I was actually having with my mother yesterday as I was driving her back down to Devon. And it very much is a matter of children learn from their parents, their teachers, their friends at school. The behaviors they watch in others is their learning process of how things are dealt with and, you know, what you do. And thinking about grief, for me, I think the first grief that I ever came across was the loss of some pets. But obviously, being somebody who really does love animals, I'd say I probably love animals more than people some of the time. And I think there are a lot of people like that. But it doesn't mean we don't love people. But my own insecurities, I felt that I got more love from animals than I felt I got from people. I'm not saying that was the case, but that's how it felt. And so, of course, the death of a dog, and I think one of the dogs, unfortunately, had to be put down because it bit the postman. And they couldn't risk having that dog round young children.
Right.
It was not that they didn't want the dog. And then another one of the family pets got run over. Sort of, and then, then I was a bit older when some of the others went. But it doesn't stop it from hurting because we did have dogs when I was little.
Right.
I was, I think, 19 before the first of my grandparents died. Oh no, my great grandmother died first. And was I in my early teens? So that was teens when that happened. Obviously, she didn't live in the house. My grandparents actually lived in the same house as us. That makes it very different.
Yes, it does bring a different dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, obviously, the closer you are, as you say, it's the dynamic. And it's, as you say, it's watching how the rest of the family
responds.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so funny because my mother had me very late in life, right? Matter of fact, she had me at 48 years old. So by the time I was, old enough, even as a child, to understand that, that parents and grandparents die on, I had lost all of my grandparents except for one on my father's side. And I remember having visited, my grandmother maybe 2 or 3 times because they lived in the South when we lived upstate in North or in New York. And so, I didn't see them frequently. I'd see them every once in a while. But I do recall when she passed away. And I remember holding my father's hand and being like maybe 7 or 8 years old going, why is grandma lying down up there? And it was, the casket, everything. And he goes, oh, she's just resting for a while now. This is going to be her resting place. But the way that he responded to me and the way that he went through the grieving process, and I was there, I never felt this heaviness. I never felt this heaviness like, oh, gloom, doom. And I don't want to belittle anyone's experience because it's real. It's very, very real for people. But the way that he and my mother guided me through that whole process, I never felt this heaviness. So when it happened again, it was like, okay, what do we have to do? All right, I'll do it, And then when I got a little bit older, my sister, who's 15 years older than me, dreaded going to funerals. And so she used to go, oh, I can't do it. I won't do it. I'll stay home. I'll do the food and whatnot and receive people when they come back. But I'm not going to that. And so then I started mimicking her. Oh, I don't want to do it. Oh, that's too much for me. I'd rather stay here and I did that for years. And I look back and it was just like, I didn't know how to process it. I really had no stage for processing it because my parents didn't give me this heaviness. So I just took on my sisters. And I just find that really interesting that that's what children do.
Yeah, absolutely. My problem is I don't remember much of my childhood, period. I do. But I suppose, you don't get me wrong. Yeah, obviously losing my grandfather, who was the first, my mum's dad, who was the first of my grandparents to go. As far as I was aware, my dad's mother died when he was 5. So it was his stepmom, who we referred to as grandma. But I suppose I was lucky because in some respects we had this ability when we got together after the funeral to talk about them very openly and remember the funny side. Sort of even talking to mum yesterday, and it was, remembering her mother when we went up to my great-grandmother's funeral, and grandma had fallen to sleep in the back of the car, having taken her false teeth out, put them in her lap, but she'd also undone her skirt to be comfortable. We stopped to go into a little shed, and she hadn't registered any of that. We just stopped. She'd got out the car, her teeth went flying, and her skirt fell down. But with my grandfather, when we lost him, it was such a shame. I had to go almost straight back to work because we were going into those remembrances of him, that we were really able to remember him with love and with laughter. And it was beautiful to be able to do that. And I do love that because for me, that is a great honoring of the individual. But I appreciate that not everybody can do that. In fact, when my grandfather died, because my grandmother still lived in the flat in the same house, and one of the dogs had just died, and the other dog, I always took the evening paper into Grandpa when I got home from work. And I still took it into Grandma. And I would appear, and the dog would cower as if I were the one who'd taken his mother, because the other dog had been his mother, and the person who walked him the most, I'd taken these two beloved from him. For some reason, he equated that with me.
Wow.
And that was really, really sad. But I think, and I do appreciate that some people have a real problem with death. My dad died just over 10 years ago. And I haven't struggled with it at all. I gave him permission to leave. I would have struggled with watching him continue to live, having gone through what he'd gone through and being more of a vegetable than the father that I knew. And so letting him go for me was the right thing to do. And by understanding from my perspective, it's about continuation day. So his body has gone, but he hasn't. His soul's still around. But my mother, she struggled with it because she'd lived with him for over 50 years. Every time she went out, she came back to an empty flat. So one of the things that she was suggested to her was put a radio on when you go out so that you have voices or you have music or you have something when you come back in and it's not sounding like an empty flat.
Right. Well, I have to tell you, I'm sitting here thinking about this, and I kind of want to, I'm going to venture out a little bit because I'm sitting here in Africa and I've had to attend funerals here. And the last funeral that I attended from a dear, 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 dear friend that every time I was here, we would visit. Every time I was here, we would visit. And he and his wife were close to us. And so there was no question about it. I had to go. I had to, be there for her because her husband died. And we, as a couple, two couples always hanging out together, we're close. And I was not prepared for what I experienced. So, you go to a funeral and you expect that you go through the ceremony and everything's done, and people will cry a little bit. But in this case, this is the first time I experienced wailing. And they were wailing before I got there. They were wailing the duration that I was there, for the day and a half, the 2 days. And I'm sure they were wailing days afterwards. And it threw me off. It was really, really hard to handle that process, because we have this thing, or at least I have this thing, where even though the grief is taking place, you know, you go for that period of time, you get it out your system, and then you have peace and you reflect, or you go introspectively in. But they non-stop wailed, and I couldn't find my peace. Mm-hmm. And then this other thing, that the way some of the rituals are designed is that for the time that you're quiet, you know, that person who's directly impacted can go rest, can just be with themselves, have that moment of peace or quiet. There was not that for the person who was impacted. She did not have a chance. She wailed. She had to be available 24 hours, 7 days a week. I made the suggestion, why don't you go rest? No. I might miss not receiving somebody, that I have to be here to receive anyone until everybody went to bed. And then that was the other thing. She was not alone. Everybody, she had somebody around her. There was no peace. There was no quiet. There was no isolating oneself to have that moment by themselves. And I don't know that I could handle that. Mm-hmm. It was so impersonal, and impersonal meaning that you could not demand any privacy. You could not go off by yourself. You could not have that moment of peace, and you couldn't stop crying because you weren't meeting the traditions. I was blown away. And so I look at that process and I wonder, you know, yes, that person would be depressed, but the question would be, you expend so much energy in meeting the process and executing it. How much is left for you to actually feel depressed? Because you've expended, I was exhausted and I was just there for a day and a half, and they will wail. They were required to wail for 7 to 10 days. Full out yelling day and night. And now when I walk through Angola and I hear it, I know what's taking place. I never knew what it was before. So it's interesting seeing other processes.
I suppose in some respects, it's being able to get that happy medium, isn't it? You need to cry, let it out. Don't bottle it up. But forcing it is as little benefit, I would have thought, to somebody than being told, stiff upper lip, as they say about the English. You stiff upper lip, don't cry. The tears are so important, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
And yeah, it's all very well saying sort of 7-10 days, but actually for that period of time, obviously within sort of different cultures, for that period of time, there are potentially people around, people checking up on you on a regular basis for maybe a couple of months or whatever. But then everybody gets back on with their own lives.
It's true.
However, if you are the bereaved, you are the one still in that, whatever the bereavement might be. You are the one still there. You are the one on your own. And okay, I referred to my father, but then okay, you just got to think about my mother lost a daughter. So obviously my mum and dad lost a daughter. You know, sort of parents can lose their children. It's not necessarily about a partner or about a parent. It can be about a sibling. It can be about so many different things. You know, it could be a mother that's carried a child for 6 months and not even had a child that's been born, but that mother has still carried that child. grief comes in many forms for many reasons. And just because other people have got on with their own lives doesn't mean that you're yet ready to do that. And so obviously the space that you're talking about. But I think it's then thinking, how do we talk to people? And we can't say, I know how you're feeling, because you have no idea how that individual is feeling. Sometimes they just would like someone to sit there and be with them. Sometimes actually it isn't a matter of avoiding talking about the individual or the circumstance. It's, what would you like to share? Because that's where we shared the fun and the laughter around things that happened within that individual's life. And I felt that we sent them off loving them enough to know what would make them smile, and they'd have been there laughing with us.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't stop it from being hard. When, especially if that person's lived in the same house, you know, and suddenly they're not there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a hard task. It really is. And it depends on the circumstances. I'm one of those people, I usually don't have a problem being able to share how I feel and say something that is very supportive. But in this scenario that I described, I had an unbelievable hard time because it threw me off kilter. The process threw me off kilter. So therefore I didn't feel like myself. And the energy for me was just, it was so heavy that it was just like, I wasn't myself. I felt like I couldn't breathe based on the process that they were going through.
And then you've got to think about what goes on in New Orleans. Which you're almost talking about
celebration.
Opposite.
And you know, I don't have a problem with celebrating the person and how they lived. I really don't have. I think that that's a great process. I do, because when you pass away, when I pass away, I want people to celebrate how I lived, not how I died.
Yeah.
I want them to celebrate what made them smile that I did. I want them to celebrate what legacy I left that just makes them so thrilled to have known me. You know, and to me, that's important. And this whole thing about, you know, I think about all of the things my parents did versus how they passed, you know, and the great lives that they led and the impact that they had and the hearts that they touched. And to me, that's what I want to hold on to. Those are the memories that I want to bring forward. I don't want to be wrapped in a loop of negativity. I just, you know, but each person handles it differently. Yeah. One of the things that I would say, though, no matter what you're grieving on, grief and depression go hand in hand. And when going through depression and grief, and if you find yourself locking yourself in a dark room, someplace dark, no sunlight, energy stale, in other words, no fresh air blowing through, you know, same clothes, all of the signs. We know the signs. We clearly understand the signs, and we're not eating, or we're lethargic and we're not moving, or we displace ourselves from participating in life, and therefore we're just home all the time, and we limit ourselves to what we do see. Stop the self-punishment, because it's almost like you want to, in order to acknowledge that the trauma happened, you're limiting yourself as a form of punishment to say, this is to prove, or this is to show that I'm in grief. Or the other part of that is maybe you're not actually doing that, and you really, really are in that process of not functioning, but you have to think about how that person would want you to live, to move, to be, to express, you know? And if they're that meaningful to you, then let their, celebrate them by doing something that symbolizes what they meant to you in a beautiful way. But this thing that we do of withdrawing and not being able to deal with our pain, we've got to move through the story of pain.
Maybe because I've just heard you use the term deal with, which in some respects, and I'm sure you didn't mean it as a negative, but some people could hear that as, oh, deal with it, get over it.
No, I said move through the story of pain, though.
Absolutely not. But it's that use of words, and it really is dealing with it. It's a matter of working with it, of saying, okay, I am accepting the fact that at the moment I am feeling really hurt. I'm feeling lost, especially if it is somebody you've lived with for years and years, and they've only been the two of you in the house for quite a few years, other than the odd visit from kids. And I get that. It is really important to work our way through it. It isn't a matter of get over it. It isn't a matter of trying to ignore it. It isn't a matter of how can I get under it or around it, because we can't. The only way is through it. And if there is the support you require, then ask for it. It is really important. If you would like to talk about it, and if you say to somebody, whether it's a child, one of your children, adult children, can I just talk to you about your dad or about your mum or about your grandmother or whatever, or your partner, if it's not a partner, if it's a parent that's gone, find somebody that you can talk with, or somebody that will just listen and let you talk. Because sometimes that is what people require. And it isn't a matter of sucking it up. It doesn't work. It won't work, because I think what we do throughout our lives with those things that we don't know how to deal with is we bury them. And if we haven't got time as adults, I can't deal with that now, I'll deal with it later. So you bury it, you put it on one side. The trouble is you don't necessarily revisit it to deal with it. And it will come back and bite you. So it is really important to say, okay, I acknowledge you. How do I help myself? What help do I require? Let me acknowledge this hurt. Because it isn't, oh, for goodness sake, it's a year, it's been 2 years. I know they say they average it out at about 2 years for grief. But some people take longer. Some people are able to get through it. You never get over it. If you've loved, but it becomes easier. My mother, she may have a gentleman friend, and it is 10 years since Dad went. But, but bless her cotton sock, she's more intent on celebrating the day he died than his birthday. And I've said to her, no, Mummy, I'm not interested in sort of the celebration. And when I say celebrate, it's not necessarily quite the right word, but it's more than an acknowledgement of the day he died. I'd rather still celebrate his birthday and celebrate his life. I acknowledge the day he died, yes. But obviously that's the day that hurts her still. So it's, support.
Mm-hmm.
And it is really important not to repress the grief, not to repress how you feel to do with any form of trauma.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So some of the key things that should be taking place is just, first of all, acknowledging the fact that you're going through grief and being able to see it. And then once you acknowledge it, how you choose to move through that story, how you choose whether you want to be listened to, whether you want to just go on those long walks, whether you want to retreat for a little while. It's beautiful. That's fine. But just do not allow yourself to get stuck in that story. And that's the key thing right there, is not allowing yourself to get stuck in the story. Because you can stay there a very, very long time and then lose the sight that you're still in it. You know? So it's a lot. It's a lot to handle trauma. And again, like we said in the beginning, every person deals with trauma differently. And the other piece of that is, and it's not always linked towards death. You know, I think of people who lose jobs, and, you know, that's real right now because so many people have lost jobs. And the grief of always being able to know that you can provide for your family, and then all of a sudden finding that, you know, everything is being challenged, you know. So dealing with it all at once from one extreme to the other is extremely hard. And you have to be able to look at that support system that you have and work with that support system to navigate your way through. But that's the key, is to navigate your way through. Because you don't have a job doesn't mean you're not qualified, that you are not valued, that your skill set isn't of value. You have to make sure that you don't go down that rabbit hole of thinking that the job defines you, and always just remember that you are the one that defines you, and you define that which you step into. So these things are important. These things are really, really important to hold on to.
And sort of that ability to be able to share with others, but also to be there for others and realize that you're not on your own.
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
it is important. I think one of the reasons that you and I do these programs, whatever our topic is to share the experiences that we have had, so that we're saying to folks, look, whatever you are going through, know you are not on your own. There are some of us that have had maybe similar experiences, or if the experience hasn't been same, maybe the feeling and our reaction to that experience has been similar.
Mm-hmm.
There are people out there experiencing what you are experiencing. And some are taking it a lot harder than you, and some are appearing to get through it better than you. But are they? Are the people that are appearing to get through it more easily really getting through it more easily? Or are they just hiding behind it? Have they buried it? And will one day they erupt into that wailing? And maybe somebody at some stage somewhere in the past realized that by doing all that wailing, it was a way of release.
Mm-hmm.
I think 7 to 10 days is a bit long, but I'm not the one that's there, that, you know. And in some respects, it would be really interesting to speak to people having had that chance to do that. Although I don't think with my belief, I don't think I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't do that wailing, because actually death is something different for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that. And I appreciate that, you know, there are going to be some that can accept what I'm saying, and others are going to be, am I cold-hearted? No, I love my dad. Yes, I miss my dad. But actually his energy is still here. And I can talk to him when I want to. I can remember him in different ways. And, you know, and we tend to remember the funny side of things. That's just what we do as a family. It doesn't mean we don't miss them. But I've lost jobs. I've lost pets. I've lost a sister. I've lost all my grandparents. You know, they've gone. Their bodies have gone, not their souls. Yeah, and even having been raised as a Catholic, I don't see death as an end.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps me. It really does help me, because in some ways, death is just a new beginning. It's our soul returning home.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it is death that is what you are going through, the grief of, I appreciate. You can never have a two-way conversation with that individual again. But they are there. They are watching over you. And I knew that I could say it, so knowing of the truth of it to my father. Your mother is here for you, as is your father, as is my sister Gillian, and as are the two boys that Mum miscarried, whose souls never made it to full human form. They were waiting for him, and it gave him permission to pass.
Yeah.
I think he passed more easily because of it. So can we, it's very difficult. I appreciate that. But watching my father the way he was no longer my dad. If we can give people permission to leave, and we know that it's only the body, maybe for some, it can make it easier to cope with the grief that follows.
It's interesting because some people might feel that giving them permission to leave will insinuate that you don't want them there. But what you're really doing is you're just allowing them to have peace in the process, and that you can let go. It's not even, okay, leave now. It's, I can now freely let go, and you don't have to feel guilty about me leaving. You don't have to feel remorse. You don't have to feel like I can't make it. I'll be able to make it. Thank you. Thank you for being here with me, and thank you for the time that we had here with you. And that's what we really mean when we're saying, I give you permission, you know, to move on. And that really needs to be clear with people, because, you know, we show our love in so many different ways. And one of those ways is by holding on. And when we hold and we love with all our strength and all of who we are, you know, that is felt by the person that is wanting to depart, wanting to transition. And so that balance of, I love you, I'm there for you, you are everything to me, and I understand that this transition has to take place. And I understand that you know that I can let go. I can let you be free. And if I can't, you'll just always be a part of my heart, but I understand. So it's a hard one. It's a hard one. And I really feel for those who have to go through it. I had to go through it with my mother and my father. know, and actually all of my parents' siblings have passed away. So, you know, it's a very odd thing to be the elder in the family, the eldest in the family. You know, my sister and I are, you know, and my cousin, because all of our parents' siblings have passed away.
Yeah.
And it's us.
Oh, when the last of my grandparents passed, I remember thinking, I was right there in the church at the funeral thinking, the next generation is my own parents. You know, and I still have my mother. But when mum goes, the next generation is just that, Katie, Jackie, and I.
That's right.
And it really is. And sometimes that can be part of it. It can be, because I think when grandma went, it was the next generation is my own parents. It's mum and dad.
It's unbelievable feeling to realize how I can't really describe that, but there's not a word for it. When my mother's last living sister passed away, and my cousin didn't get it. My cousin was going through the grieving process of losing her mother, but you know, and I was asked to speak at the funeral, and I did, and it was just like, you know, when I made the statement of how we, as the next generation, and now the oldest generation, will you know, make you proud. You've taught us well. We're prepared, you know, and we're here for our children. And she said, it didn't dawn on me that all of mommy's siblings are gone. All of my dad's siblings are gone. Yeah, both on my side too, you know? And so it was just like a realization that just hit you.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's a responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Suddenly we become the oldies in the family.
Mm-hmm. But the ones that the kids go to, the ones that have to say something, that should say something, you know, the ones that bring the families together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and I, you know, as much as I don't have children, yeah, it is lovely every now and again if one of my nieces or nephews comes to me. Now I know they've got their own mothers, but sometimes as aunt, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's because we all have our different things that we are good at. And obviously, yeah. So
There's this dynamic in the family that it's always the aunties that have the best knowledge because they don't listen to the moms. You know, they don't want to hear it from mom. Aunties can say the same exact thing, and then it's like, oh, light bulb on. No, mom's been saying that the whole time, but okay, you needed to hear from your aunt. That's fine with me. You know? So yes, you have a big responsibility there.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
absolutely. And obviously one of the because obviously we said there were going to be certain things that we'd sort of touch on, the possible long-term effects of repressed grief and trauma. Now we obviously hear about people who die of broken heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure they do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because that is, their grief is such that they actually do not want to go on without the other individual. But I think what we've got to realize is that if you repress it, if you don't allow yourself to have those times of tears, those times of, okay, I will allow myself to have a, I don't know how, whatever term you use it, pajama day or whatever. I am going to take myself away. I'm going to be able to go for walks. I don't want anybody around me. I am just going to do whatever I want to for a period of time. And if you want space, or, you know, actually now it's time, I really do want to talk to somebody, find someone to talk to. If you don't allow yourself to go through it the way that works for you, trauma that is not dealt with can bring up its own major issues health-wise. Depression, anxiety being just the tip of the iceberg, because it can also lead to other major health issues. And that includes obviously not feeding yourself properly. And just makes it harder and harder to live life. And as you commented, sort of much earlier in the program, the people that have left, they wouldn't want us to not live our lives, to go on and continue to experience.
I think that you're being really even kind about it, because the bottom line is that if you don't take care of yourself, your body will shut down.
Yeah.
Period. You have to take care of yourself. There's just no question about it. The body was not made to stay in the dark 24/7. The body was not made to be in a state of depression for years and years and years. It reacts. And the longer you stay in it, the more it's going to react, and the more that you bring it on. The body was made to have laughter, to release, to have sunlight, to have joy, to be nurtured, to be engaged in human touch, to be loved, to be engaged in emotion. It doesn't matter that it's an up and down roller coaster, because then that's a change of emotion. And that's what the body needs, because if you're in a constant state of depression all the time, your body's going to react and eventually shut down. And that shutdown is going to cause dis-ease or disease. And then it just comes on, and you know where that path leads. We must engage in life. That's why we're living. And sometimes we can't just we can't. I have compassion. It's not being uncompassionate, but that's real. That's very, very real. And for those people who are depending on you, it's even more real, because they may not know how to engage you and tell you, we need you. We need you to get out of this and snap out of this, because we need you. We need you to live. We need your help, your assistance, your knowledge, your wisdom to be taken care of, to nurture, to show me to be the best version of me. All those things are reasons why we're here. Our purpose, to share that light. It's very important.
And it is important to love yourself. Yes, it is wonderful that something has been so precious to you that it has caused this grief, this hurt, this pain, this trauma. It is wonderful that you've had something that has been hopefully so fulfilling in your life. But it doesn't mean that you can't have that again in a different way, maybe. So as we were talking, it's about a celebration of that thing. I am so pleased I experienced that. As I said to my dad, thank you for being my dad. I suppose with Gillian, thank you for being my sister, however short a time it was. For my grandparents, thank you. Thank you for being there for the times that you were. And knowing that, we still have those memories. And I think for too many of us, the encouragement is towards negativity rather than positivity, towards the weeping and the wailing, against the, yes, we acknowledge the hurt, the sadness, but we also acknowledge the joy and the laughter and the fun and the pleasure and all the experiences we had with that individual. And we can remember with love and with a smile. Because if we can smile and if we can laugh, we are letting in sunshine, which is what our lives require to be fulfilled. And if you've lost an individual, they wouldn't want you to be anything other than continue to be happy. If it's to do with a job or a home or whatever, if it's something more material, do you know what? Yes, it may be sad that it's gone, but we can pick ourselves up, because probably there is something way better waiting for us if we but let ourselves be open to it. So where is your grief? What is your grief about? Because if it is a material thing, there is something much better waiting for you. If it is the love of an individual, a person, then honor them. Honor the love that you had by remembering the joy, the fun, and the laughter, those amazing times you had together, whether there were children or not, whatever that life was you had together. And I suppose I feel very blessed that that was really the nearest I got, I suppose, to guidance. But remembering that actually I went through grief and trauma way much younger than that, when nobody could teach me how to deal with it, so I didn't deal with it. It was buried.
Yeah. We have, I believe, given our audience a lot to think about. Yeah, we're coming up on an hour, so I think that that might be a great place to just pause and reflect and to really take in consideration how you grieve. So thank you, Sarah Jane, for all of those, your perspective and the stories and the sharing from the heart. And we hope that it was meaningful to you out there in the studio audience. So at this point,
and I would like to say thank you to you for your sharing too, because this is about sharing. I also want to say I don't know what happened to Mary, and I'm very sorry that she hasn't joined us. Obviously, my first thought always is I hope everything's okay.
Yeah.
And obviously I couldn't phone her. I have emailed her, and I will obviously now try getting in touch with her and saying I hope everything's okay. So I hope that it is. But yeah, thank you, Enolia, for your part in this. And you're now going to share what we're up to next in a fortnight's time.
Yes. So we will be back with you on Friday, the 11th of March, and that will be 9 a.m. PST, 12 p.m. EST, and 5 p.m. GMT, which is UK time. And we're going to have our guest, Christina Konya, joining us. And she's going to discuss with us the connection between self-love and success. So we're really excited to have Christina with us. And I hope that you'll join us on the 11th. And we hope to see you there. So take care of yourself wherever you are in the world. And thank you for joining us here at today's conversation.
Thank you, Enolia. Thank you, folks.
Yeah.
Namaste.
Aho.
Bye-bye.